Hi everyone, it's Tracy Terranova, and I am presenting my action research project for the Johnson & Wales University Research 1 class. It is May 2nd, 2018, and my research question really was looking at closing the equity gap for underrepresented students, specifically female students in this case, in STEM learning experiences. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. And I was looking at my school in particular. So I know I've talked about the Met before, that we have over 800 students, but I was really just looking at my 140-ish kids in this case. So before I get into what I learned and what findings I have, I really want to talk about why I became interested in this topic to begin with, and why I think that it's important for everyone to be interested in underrepresented students, again, specifically females, in the science, technology, engineering, and math career fields. So I made a little video to find out why it's important. So let's check it out. 74% of teenage girls are interested in the STEM career fields when they're in high school. But many of them don't pursue it because they think that other girls their age aren't interested and they don't want to be the only ones in class. So women make up half of the total college-educated workforce, but only 29% in the science and engineering workforce. So why aren't there more girls in STEM? So some of my research told me that it's because of bias in the classroom. There's not enough female role models, and there's a chilly climate that's caused by male counterparts. So bias in the classroom. There's lots of teachers that still feel that science and math is fixed, and that no matter how much teaching, kids won't get better at it. Robnett did a small sampling of female students, talk about this gender bias in classrooms, and over 61% of them in math and science class said that they had gender bias. Yet girls were found to use technology at the same rate as boys, but were 5 times less likely to consider a computer-related career. So the need for role models. Only 26% of women with a STEM degree actually work in STEM. But girls who are taught by female math and science teachers are more likely to major in STEM. And because girls are underrepresented, they feel like they don't belong, so they leave. But there's a cycle of influence that exists. So the more female role models we have, the more women stay in the field, and it continues to be this cycle. The chilly college classroom and work environment, well, that's typically because females value social relationships, and many students possess negative stereotypes about people that work in STEM. And there's a lack of community and helpfulness and a lot of competition in these fields that drive out female colleagues. And the fast-paced environment of STEM can force women to decide between career and family, which is something that male counterparts don't typically deal with as a societal norm. And retention is a really big deal. So if women aren't connected to their career field, they're going to leave. And that one study stated that the quit rate for women in STEM-related jobs was more than double their male counterparts. And that's because there's a lack of mentoring or discrimination by coworkers or managers. And that is all connected to what's called the leaky pipeline, which basically says that starting in high school, that there's all of these females that are interested in science, that are studying it. And then by the time they go through college and graduate school, that it dwindles down to this tiny little bit of STEM graduates. But it can be stopped. And it begins with us. So that is kind of where I leave off what my research was about. So to begin, I need to look at some baseline data. So I've been the principal at the Met Equality for a little over 2 years. And this has been something that I've really been interested in since last year. And so our 2016, 2017, our building had 137 students in it. 53% of those students were female. And when I looked at the end of year internship data, none of our female students had an internship in science, technology, engineering, or math. And in fact, only 30% of them had STEM on their transcripts at all. So that was really disconcerting as a building leader, as an educator, as a woman. So I wanted to continue this research, and the action research was a perfect opportunity to do so. So my research question was, how can I increase the number of underrepresented students, so again, females in this case, in the STEM career cluster? So career clusters, there's 16 of them. STEM's one, like I said before. So I did choose to do a quantitative study. The participants were going to include current students and their advisors. So like I've said before, there's 16 students per one advisor, and they're with them for all 4 years. And I chose this method of study because, according to Creswell, if the problem is identifying factors that influence an outcome, the utility of an intervention, or understanding the best predictors of outcomes, then a quantitative approach is best. So I really wanted to understand why did I have no females in the STEM career cluster last year? And I wanted to kind of do a little bit of experimenting and research around that. So my sample was comprised of students and advisors from the Equality Building. So like I said, only the 137. Advisors were surveyed specifically on the academics of their students. I sent a Google Sheet out via email. I sent a Google form out to the 137 students using their school email. And that was the sample that I took from. Now, not all students completed it. All advisors completed it, but not all students. So the instrumentation that I used, so like I said, I used a Google form that surveyed students, and I collected information that had to do with if they're interested in science, math, engineering, technology, if they had an internship around it, if they felt like they needed more exposure, if they were doing projects on it, if they did it in middle school versus high school. The Google Sheet that the staff had was specifically about student learning. So it asked the student's name, demographics, the male, female, and also ethnicity. And it said, do they have STEM on their learning plan or transcripts? And if so, how? Was it through a college class, or was it through an internship or a computer science class? So I really wanted to know where we were getting these things from. And then we also have learning through internship data that is collected weekly, and that is basically where students are interning. And so we have to document that via career cluster. So that gave me an idea of which kids were in internships that would be classified as STEM or not. So my findings after doing all of that, like I said, this is something that I've been interested in since last year. So I actually did a first survey back in November before this class even started. And at that time, out of the 137 kids, I had 20 students that had STEM on their learning plan. And out of those 20 students, 15% of them were female. And 15% of students in the whole building, so that's boys and girls, had STEM on their learning plan, because not only am I looking at the underrepresented students, but I also want to make sure that all of my students are getting an equitable experience. So then I had people do it at the end of the second trimester. So the first trimester, not all the kids are out on internships, so I was expecting the numbers to be lower. Not all of the students are getting to the swing of their projects, so I was expecting the numbers to be lower, but I was actually pretty surprised with the growth that I saw. So by the end of March, the second trimester, 61 students had STEM on their learning plan. And out of those 61 students, 51% were female, and 46% of students total had STEM on their learning plans. So that was an increase across all three areas. So we increased by 41 kids from November to March. We increased by 36% with female students specifically, and we increased 31% students across the board, males and females. So that was exciting. That was great. That was based on what the advisors collected with that Google Sheet that I had given them. So that was really exciting for me, and I was happy that students had that on their learning plans, which then will transition over to their transcripts. So we don't fill out transcripts until the end of the year. But also, I saw the increase in science, technology, engineering, and math also spilled over to that internship piece. So that learning through internship data sheet, looking at that, like I said, last year, no females had an internship in STEM. And this year, we had an increase to 5 females. So we increased it, which was awesome. Out of those 5 students, 80% of them had been exposed to STEM this year. So that was also something that was important to me because through my research, exposure is a big piece to that. If students don't know what's out there, then they're not going to pursue it. So what I found after my 14 years of working at the Met is a lot of kids just kind of look at careers that they've either seen on TV or seen in their families. And again, because in my research, and I kind of showed that if there's not a lot of female role models out there, then females don't even think that STEM is an opportunity for them, or kids of color even. So it was pretty great that staff kind of encompassed this exposure piece. And so we did things like Hour of Code, and we did computer science, and we had a guest speaker come in. We talked about different career fields in engineering, math, the technology piece, the science piece. So it was great to see that increase of 0 to 5. And like I said, 4 out of 5 of those kids had never even thought about this until they got exposed to it. So one kid came in knowing what they wanted to do, which is great. But to have the additional 4 be exposed and then be excited about it was pretty awesome too. So that just kind of proved to me that we can make an impact in what students are interested in based on what they're exposed to. And that kind of connects to my recommendations moving forward. So I did research. We read this author as a staff, so advancing equity through more and better STEM learning. So Barron says, in STEM fields, business leaders should work with parents and schools to encourage students, especially girls and underrepresented minorities, to pursue STEM in middle school, high school, and college. So that's basically exactly encompasses like what my action research plan was about. We are a community-based and internship-based school. We do look for business leaders in the community to help support our students and support their learning. So this was a great quote that we found as a staff in a reading that we did. So again, my recommendations are we need more female role models. I need to find more female STEM guest speakers and mentors that they can actually take our kids at an internship, and just role models in general. So one thing that we're into right now is Brown University, the computer science program. There's a female there who specifically wants to have a female of color come and intern with her. And so I have a junior who has been doing some work around that, really step up. And so she just got accepted to take over that internship. So that's exciting. More exposure to STEM learning for all students. So like I said in that previous slide, 4 out of 5 of those kids had never even thought about doing STEM until they got exposed to it. So it just goes to prove that that exposure piece is so important. So that kids know what's out there and they know that they can absolutely do those things that they see other people do, or they are playing on a video game and they learn about coding or whatnot. So I think the exposure piece is really important. And in order to do that, I need to have more training for my staff in STEM related topics. So the majority of my staff, all of my staff, in fact, all 9 certified advisors are all in English and history. And so there's a real like science and math phobia that I myself sometimes have, but I can't have that as a leader. So there's a math phobia, science phobia, that it's a scary subject, or both of them. Like STEM is a scary kind of subject that it's very technical, and just having staff be more comfortable with that can lead to that more exposure piece for students. So I think having more professional development, we have a certified math teacher on our staff. So seeing if he can help some of the staff that might be a little uncomfortable with it, I think will just increase that exposure and increase like our goal. So I wanted to end in a way, kind of how I began. This is a worldwide thing that females are not in STEM roles. It is something that is going to impact us, or is already impacting us, but will impact us further if we don't do something about it as educators. Because if there are little girls who are in elementary school and they don't think that they're as smart in math and science as like their male counterparts, for whatever reason, whether it's like the implicit bias that educators have, or whether it's the lack of female role models, or just that boys are like, oh, girls are bad at math, like any of those things, we need to fix that. And it's hard for me as a high school principal to kind of see that defeat already in girls' eyes when they come to me in ninth grade. So I do the best that I can, but I think it's also important for those younger girls to kind of get that motivation to be able to do whatever they want to do. So this is a video that I found that I'm planning on showing all of my students, but specifically my girls. So I hope that it kind of encompasses what this whole project was about.
You know, women are hugely underrepresented in the STEM fields. In my field of physical sciences, women are about 30%. The sad part of it is some of those numbers have actually been declining over the last few years. I would strongly argue if you're not utilizing the talent of all of your population, if you're actively discouraging people from going into fields that are going to help move this country forward, help us solve things like climate change, you're not doing a good job. And the fact is, girls, a lot of people of color don't feel welcome in the sciences.
I've been in situations where I've went into meetings and people have actually thought that I was someone's assistant. And then it's pretty funny to 20 minutes later, it's like, oh, who are you? It's like, well, I actually lead the Google Litter X Prize, which I do get a little bit of joy out of that. My advice to girls is that you can be and do whatever you want, and there's so many different areas that you can work in around this.
When I meet young girls, when I go into schools in cities, I say, you belong in the STEM fields. It's a good career. It pays good money. We need your talent. Don't you let anybody ever make you feel like you don't belong.
To go into the science field, it's been mostly driven by my passion. Once I've opened the doors, though, and reached out to science communities, I've definitely had a lot of encouragement, especially as a young person. What I want to say to women who are thinking about science is that this is something they should definitely get into. The fate of planet Earth is in their hands, and something that women can definitely make a huge impact in. We need all hands on deck, and that includes a large group of women.
You know, women are hugely underrepresented in the...
So yes, all hands on deck, and I hope that you learned something. Thank you. Bye.